Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Ouellette. You know me as Bishop Bryan Ouellette of the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church on this July 27th, 2018. Coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. This is Vestiges After Dark, a mere episode where we discuss the other side of spirituality. Tonight we're talking about Ouija boards, and I am here with my co-host Joy Keeling, who will be with us for the first hour, and then Sister Maximilian will be here for the second hour to continue our discussion, taking your questions from the chat room. Go in and log in now. It's going to be an interesting evening. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to this brand new show, brand new edition, Vestiges After Dark, the sister show to Vestiges of Christianity. I have to say that it's been a long time coming, but now we're in a position where we can offer you this additional content, and I'm very pleased to be able to do so at this new time slot, working around my schedule and trying to find, opportunities to be able to deliver to you accurate content, quality content. There's too much garbage out there in the realm of the paranormal, in the realm of the esoteric, and in the realm of metaphysics itself. I want to sort of clean the slate and give you access to better information, which is what I do on Twitter. Most of you know me from Twitter. You've seen me on Travel Channel, but, you really got to know me on Twitter. And this is what we do on Twitter. I mean, if you follow me at all, you know that this is what we do almost every single day, sifting through all of the garbage that's out there. I want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat room on Spreaker. Welcome. I guess for right now, Joy will be following all of your messages, and will be any good questions that come in throughout the show. We will do our best to answer as many of them as possible. We also have some questions from Twitter that we need to answer tonight, things of a darker spiritual nature, which is the purpose of this show. I also want to say very quickly before we get started here that there's been a lot of interest in my doing a live seminar, maybe even traveling around to talk about spiritual protection and what is required in order to best protect yourself against the forces of darkness, which are everywhere, and certainly those more vulnerable, which are those who participate in paranormal investigation, as well as people that are naturally sensitive. And it would be good to perhaps do a bit of a world tour where we would go around and teach people good methodology. Since I'm a person of personal responsibility. That's what I believe very strongly in, and as such, I really feel that I'm not going to be here and tell you not to go and do these things. But what I do feel is part of my responsibility is, if you're going to do it, make sure that you know how to protect yourself. And most of the information out there is pure garbage, as we alluded to at the beginning. So if you're interested in this, we need help, because my office staff is very much at capacity in terms of the work that they have to do. And, of course, everybody in the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church, including myself, works on a volunteer basis. So it's really very difficult to give a new project to everyone when they're already, in over their heads with all of the other projects. So if you would like to help, or if you have ideas, or more importantly, if you haven't experience in getting such a seminar off the ground, knowing how to market it, put it together, we would love to be able to work with you if you'd be interested in this. Send your interest to office@nicholean.org. Just go to esotericcatholic.org and push on the Contact Us tab, and you can send us an email, and my office will get in touch with you to discuss what you think you may be able to do in this regard. Certainly, if we are able to successfully get such a seminar off the ground, there would obviously be financial compensation for the people that are part of this. So if it is something that you would like to participate in, if you feel it's something that you could contribute, we would need your help, and I think it would be a great service as well. And of course, initially it would have to be volunteer, because it would be, grassroots. We're getting it started, but once it's viable, there would be room for compensation there. Anyway, enough of that. If you're interested, you know how to reach me. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring Joy Keeling on the show. Joy, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us and joining us at this late hour. Of course, for you, it's not so bad over there in Mountain Time. On the East Coast, people are starting to get a little sleepy, but it is, it is Friday night after all, and hopefully, there's people ready to go with this topic. And the topic I thought would be the most pertinent to starting off this show and launching it in a good direction, giving people a real taste and flavor for what this new show's all about, is to talk about the Ouija board. I think that there is no subject that I get asked more about than this, certainly as both a metaphysician and as a Catholic bishop, albeit independent, which gives me a lot of freedom in terms of what I do study and research and participate in. But overall, people want to know, is it dangerous? Because there is so much information out there that says it is, and there are people that swear that it is. I know that the late Art Bell had a very interesting story that he never really revealed to anyone about his experience with a Ouija board. It was for those who are big Art Bell fans and remember his classic days on Coast to Coast. You probably know the story. Well, it's not really the story. We just know sort of the preface to it, that he was sent this Ouija board. And we really don't know too much after that. Some people have been able to piece certain things together about his experience. And one of those things was that he apparently received it. Strange things happened. He destroyed it. And then the next morning, he found it in perfect condition back inside his house. And apparently there were other things that transpired, things that he would not talk about. And that was, of course, that contributes to the lore, and people that are interested in the paranormal certainly have listened to that show. He's sort of one of the pioneers of this field, at least in terms of, broadcasting these topics to the masses. And he was a great inspiration to me in a lot of ways, wanting to get into podcasting to participate in these discussions on a more deliberate way. So, that was what he talked about in terms of the Ouija board, but he always warned his listeners never to play around with them. It was not a game. Found it to be very dangerous, and that is certainly the consensus out there. I am going to share tonight, unlike Art Bell, I am going to share tonight my personal experience with the Ouija board, which is extensive. I actually own, still do, in fact. Of course, I don't have the original one, which I'll explain why in a moment. But I actually own a very high-quality Ouija board that is made of wood. It is not the Parker Brothers kind. And this was one that I had purchased from a witch in Massachusetts on the very tip. If you know what the geography of the state of Massachusetts looks like, then you know that you got the mainland part, and then there's this little hook that branches out into the ocean. And at the very, very, very tip of that, I guess you could say peninsula, is a town called Provincetown. It's kind of an eclectic, artistic sort of place. It has a lot of feeling of maybe being in Key West, only with more of a northern slant. It has a very San Francisco kind of attitude. There's a lot of artists that gravitate there, as well as occultists and people of alternative lifestyles, particularly alternative spiritualities. I was there not for any of those things. In fact, I didn't even know much about the town. I had never really been there, even though I was born and grew up in both I was born in Rhode Island, but I grew up mostly in Massachusetts. I had never really actually been all the way through Cape Cod to the very tip. But I had a summer job there working in that area, and that gave me access for an entire summer, since Provincetown is a seasonal place. It's a tourist destination, but it's only really operational in the summertime. Because it's just way too cold, and people tend to not go out to the ocean in the winter out there. And so I became part of the community and was very much attracted to the alternative spiritualities, which I had been exploring. And those of you who know my very ancient history, I was not raised in any kind of religious home. We considered ourselves Catholic, but very loosely Catholic. We never really went to church except for maybe once or every year or every other year. And when we did go, we didn't go to a parish. We tend to go to a monastery or convent. And so, by the time I had become a teenager, even though I was having some pretty unusual personal spiritual experiences that were very much, now looking back in hindsight, indicative of my call to priesthood, I was not on that wavelength, not to the degree that I perhaps should have been. And so I was still exploring many other alternative forms of spirituality that were attractive, and certainly the New Age was very intriguing. I had very little experience with it at this point in my life, and here was this entire town. It was like a shopping mall devoted to it. And it was not just, of course, the New Age, but it was also Wicca and various other forms of witchcraft and, everything that goes along with that, including divination and Ouija boards. So I became quite fascinated with the Ouija board when I went into this particular shop, and they're all really, really cool shops. If you never get a chance to go to Provincetown, I mean, I'm not saying that you really need to take a trip out there, but if you happen to be in the area of Cape Cod, you're not going to want to miss Provincetown. It's kind of a unique place to go. I don't know what it's like today. I mean, you're talking, this is years ago, folks, but I found this Ouija board, and I started talking to the witch that ran the shop, and I had never seen one like this. I was familiar with the board game kind in the toy store. You can even get them at Books A Million and Barnes and Noble now. they glow in the dark. But no, this was a real one. Okay, this was one that was made of wood, and it was unlike any other kind that I had ever seen. And I was just so enthralled with it, I just purchased it on the spot and brought it home. Now, by this point, I had already had some friends from work that I, would get together with after work, and, we'd sit around and drink wine or talk or, walk down to the docks and see the fishing boats go out, because they always, went out late at night. And I talked them into saying, hey, let's start giving this a try. Let's see what this is all about. Well, most of them didn't want anything to do with it. They had more experience, I guess, than I had with it. And so they avoided it. They didn't want to get into it. And so I talked two of them into it, two of my closer friends, and I won't give the name of the other one, but I'll give the name of one. Her name was Alice, and they decided that, yeah, let's do this. Let's try it. Let's see if it really works. And I was looking at it from the vantage point of metaphysical testing, exploration. I really didn't believe that they worked, but I wanted to see if they worked, and I wanted to test to see if these things really worked. That was my motivation here, because I wasn't really into witchcraft, even though I was fascinated with the study of it. I, as a practitioner at that point, there was no interest there. But the whole idea of divination and automatic writing and that type of phenomenon did interest me. I wanted to know more about it, and so we bought this thing. And I got these two friends together, and we went up to into my apartment, and we just put it down there. We lit some candles, and then we started asking questions. Typically what people would say, is anybody there? And almost instantaneously, it went immediately to yes. And we had three hands on it, three different people using the board. I was one of them, and we all had our right hand on the planchette, and it immediately moved to yes. I mean, it felt almost magnetic, kind of like the feeling that you get when you bring two magnets together, and you're trying to hold them apart, but the force of the magnetism is drawing them together, and you feel that sort of tension there, that resistance. That's what it felt like. But of course, it was not. I was not entirely sure that we weren't accidentally moving it, or if it was some kind of subconscious thing, because I was very much aware at this point of the ideomotor effect, which is basically how science explains how they work. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about the ideomotor effect in a moment. But, for those who are believers that this actually does open up worlds, or open us up to the spiritual world, and allows spirits to come through to communicate with us, of course, they're not seeing it as ideomotor effect. They're seeing it as the actual spirit using your energy to move the planchette across the board. At this point, I wasn't sure, but one thing I did know for a fact is that the people that I was doing this with were sincere, they were genuine, and they would not have lied to me. They were people I could trust, and that was important to me with doing this. I did not invite anybody who I felt maybe would have played games or tried to manipulate the experience. So we started doing it, and we started at first getting just vague answers, mostly yes and no, mostly maybe one letter to, like, if we'd ask a name, we would get like a D or something, but that was it. And then by the time we had reached the 6th or 7th session, we did this every evening after work. This became our new pastime. By the time we reached about the 6th or 7th session, which would have been about, a week into this, all of a sudden the dynamic changed. And what used to be very disjointed, almost unintelligible responses became free-flowing sentences. And this thing was spewing off content so fast that we eventually had to have another person come by and be a scribe to write down what was being said, because the three of us who were asking the questions and using the board could not keep up with the letters that were coming out. It was moving so fast. And this was just an instantaneous transition. And this spirit, or group of spirits, is really what they referred to themselves as, gave very interesting, detailed information about a great many things of a spiritual nature. In fact, they answered every question that we posed to them. But they couldn't do certain things which we found strange. For example, first time they gave us something, they mentioned, one of them mentioned that they had died in Provincetown, and I think they gave a year. And I decided that next day to go to the library and see if I could find any information on their microfilm about that date, and see if I could find an obituary. Of course, I only had a first name, but I wanted to see if a person of that first name actually died in that location. And I found a match. And it seemed to even match up with the content that we received from that particular spirit, which I found quite exciting and intriguing. I ran back. I told everybody that was involved in this, we found this information. It's true. At least it sort of checks out. So let's take it to the next level. So the next step was, and those of you who have been listening to me for a long time or follow me know that I consider Vegas my true home, and I love, poker, and I actually enjoy all forms of gambling, and of course healthy moderation. I don't believe in any kind of addictive practices, but I think that gambling is a great form of unwinding and entertainment, and I enjoy it. And so I had a very nice roulette wheel. I still do, and I wanted to see if they could not predict what the number was going to be, because I didn't think they had that ability. At least I wasn't asking that yet. What I wanted to just see if they could, because when you would ask them where they were, they would always say they were floating above the board. So I'd say, like, where are you in the room? And they would say, like, they would write out above you. And I said, like, are you standing? Are you standing over me? Are you floating? And they would say floating. And so it was kind of what you would anticipate or expect a spirit to be doing, I guess. And so I asked them, I said, I would like you to float to the other room, and I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to spin the roulette wheel, and I'm going to leave the room, and I'm going to come back to the board, and I want you to stay in the room. I want you to tell me what number it lands on, and come back and tell me what the number is. And so I said, will you do this for me? And they said yes. And I said, okay, well, go do it. Let's go do it. So I got my roulette wheel. And a standard roulette wheel in the United States has 36 numbers plus a 0 and a double 0. So there's 38 possible numbers that it could land on. So you have a 1 in 38 chance of hitting any one number. And any one number is as good as any other number. And so I went in there. I put in the other room. I put the roulette wheel down. I spun the wheel. And I left before the wheel stopped spinning. And that was important because I wanted to make sure that none of us knew what the number landed on. just to avoid the potential of the ideomotor effect, which, if you don't know what that is making subconscious movements with your hand that you're not aware that you're actually making. Okay? And some people actually think that the scientific reality of the Ouija board is actually more frightening than the paranormal explanation, which I'll, again, explain in a moment. So we did this, okay? And the spirit came back, and we just, basically what I did is I went in there, I spun the wheel, left before it stopped spinning, came back to the Ouija board, sat down, put my hand on the planchette, and just waited. And the board sat there silent until it stopped spinning, and you could hear it spinning. And then when the ball landed, all of a sudden, the planchette moved to a number. I don't remember what the number was, but I do remember that it was incorrect. It was not the number that the actual wheel had landed on. We did this 5 times, and all 5 times the spirit told us the wrong number. And when we would ask them why they are giving us the wrong information, if you're truly floating above us, why aren't you able to tell us what number it is? It should be easy. I could go in there and tell you what number it is. Just go look at the wheel. Why is this so difficult for you? And they would get angry. Okay, they would start moving the planchette wildly off the board. They'd stop talking altogether, but they would never answer the question. They would never explain why they could not tell me what the number was. I wasn't asking them to predict the number. I wasn't saying, okay, we're going to spin the number. What number is it going to land on? That was not what I was asking them. I was asking them to go and look after it stopped. And if there was a spirit in the room, they should have been able to do that. So at this point, I was really starting to second guess the authenticity of the Ouija board being a way of communicating with spirits. I really was leaning more towards the ideomotor effect, which would make sense, because if it is the subconscious that we're actually communicating with, well, there's no way the subconscious mind would know what number the wheel landed on, because none of us had actually gone to look. I left the room. I was the only one in the room. I was the only one that spun the wheel, and I left the room before the wheel stopped, or the ball stopped. So there would be no way for any of our subconsciouses to know, which would explain perhaps why these quote-unquote spirits couldn't tell us what that number was. However, we did another experiment. This time, we asked them if they could manifest. Prove that you're here, because you're not able to tell us about the... In fact, I think we stopped after the roulette experiment, and this was the next week. Okay, so this was almost a week later. We finally said, okay, you can't tell us what the number is on a wheel. You should be able to do that. You won't tell us why you can't do that. And you're not telling us why you're telling us the wrong number. Because it's not like you're saying, well, I can't see the number. You're not saying, well, I can't give you this information. You're not even saying, I'm not going to do that. You would think that if they couldn't do it, they would just simply say, I'm not going to. But they agreed to do it. And they came back with 5 numbers, and all 5 numbers were wrong. So we said, if you really do exist, we want proof, because we're having a hard time believing you now. Okay, you've told us all this stuff. Sounds really good on paper. But so far, the tangible experiments that we're conducting with you are not producing results. And so I said, I would like you to manifest something. You don't have to appear before us, but if you can do that, that would be really great. I said, but can you do something in the room? Move something. Show us that you really exist. And they said, okay. Get up and leave the room and come back in 5 minutes. It wrote that sentence out. Get up, leave the room, come back in 5 minutes. Oh, and it also said to lock the door. Okay? So we did. And I locked the door. All of the rooms in this apartment it was an old building, and they all had locks with keys on them. So I had the key, and so we get up, we walk out, lock the door, and we waited 5 minutes. We heard nothing. There was nothing strange going on in the apartment, but we heard nothing coming from the room. But we were, I have to say, a little bit anxious to get in there, maybe even a little bit spooked because it seemed really interesting, like what's going to happen here. And so unlock the door, open up the door, go inside, and we turn on the lights, and we're looking all over, and there's nothing that we can detect that's changed. Nothing. We looked everywhere, and I should have mentioned this before, we made a good mental picture of everything in the room before we did anything, and sure enough, there was nothing that we could see. So again, this is further reinforcing my contention at this point that the Ouija board is just a bunch of nonsense. So we go to the Ouija board and we say, okay, we're not it's obviously whatever you did is not very obvious. Go ahead. I would like to, I'd like to know what you did. Just tell us. So it kept saying, you'll see. It kept spelling that out. And we said, no, well, we want to know. And it said, you'll see. And, we said, okay, stop playing games. What did you do? And it said, just go watch TV. And then it said goodbye. So we had learned by this point when the Ouija board said goodbye, there was really no getting anything back from it. When it went voluntarily to goodbye, it was the session was over, and the planchette would just sit there, which was actually kind of interesting. So my friends, the two people that have been doing this with me the entire time, get up and leave. I walk over to the door. Bear in mind, I'm by myself, just with them. There's no one else in the apartment. There's no other access points. There's only one door in, one door out. And I walked them to the door, said goodnight, closed the door, went back into my room, and did what I did every evening before going to bed. Still what I do every evening before going to bed. I turn on the TV for a little bit and watch about maybe 5 minutes to get sleepy, go to sleep. So I did that. Went there, turned on the TV, kind of thinking in the back of my mind, they told me to watch TV, didn't they? Which is kind of what I do. Maybe they know what I do, if they are anything at all, if they are real. So I'm looking at TV, and I think David Letterman was on. And nothing unusual. So I turned the TV off. But when I turned the TV off, I noticed that there was a distortion on the screen. Okay. And I wasn't quite sure, what it was, because I could kind of see it when it was on, but it just looked like, it looked like almost a scratch on the screen. And I mean, this was like a fairly brand new television. And keep in mind, it's kind of important to the story. I'm a horrible, horrible housekeeper. So dusting is not quite my thing. And, to say the least, the entire room probably had never been dusted or vacuumed or anything. And so therefore there was a great deal of dust collected, which collected on the TV screen. And when the TV was off, I could see that somebody had written on the TV screen. And in the TV screen, I kid you not, it said, "Hi, Bryan. Hi, Alice. And hi, the name of the other person." Kid you not. And that, I can tell you, was not there. I didn't put it there, and there was nobody that ever went into my room that would have gone over there and done that. I only ever had anybody in that room when we were doing the Ouija board, and it was always my back to the TV. No one ever walked by the TV. There was no reason to walk by the TV. So there was no chance that anybody would have manipulated that TV. Okay? But that's not even the strangest part about this. The strangest part is the way the letters were written. Because think about it. If you're going to go and you're going to write on dust, sort of like people do with dirty cars, they'll write "wash me" on them and stuff like that. If you're going to write on a TV screen that's extremely dusty with an inch thick of dust, you're going to write like you would with a pencil. So high, if you're writing the letter H, you're going to write the first line top to bottom, and then you're going to go from left to right and then top to bottom to create the letter H. But that's not how they wrote this. They wrote it bottom to top. Because how could I tell that? Where the dust collected. If they had written it like a normal human would have, it would have been top to bottom, and all the dust would have been collected at the bottom of the H in the letter, in the word high. But that's not what it was. All the dust collected at the top, as though it was written by somebody upside down. True story. That is a true story. Now, we did other experiments with the Ouija board after that. That was definitive proof to me that we were dealing with something that was beyond my expectation or what I at the time understood. That it had the ability to affect the physical world outside of the realm of the board, which idiomotor effect does not explain. And furthermore, in the additional things that we did and the information we received, it led me to believe that we were dealing with something that was intelligent, but not terribly honest, because a lot of the information it did give us was not accurate, particularly predictions of the future. It could never get right, and it gave us a lot of predictions of the future. Now, Joy has had her own experience with a Ouija board, but it kind of fell flat for you, right, Joy?
Yeah. I had a boyfriend that brought one over, and we started trying to do the Ouija board thing, and it didn't move. Nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
Yeah.
And see, that is something that I hear from a lot of people, that they get all excited. They go to the store, they pick up their Parker Brothers, and they get it home, and the planchette just sits there and does absolutely nothing. Now, one thing that is kind of interesting, and I want to mention that the person's name, who I will not mention, if that person was not there, we didn't get those long paragraphs of information. And even more interesting is that this individual started to develop very unusual sleeping disorders, where the person would wake up in the middle of the night and start talking as though they were awake in another voice. They would think they were in different places. They would wake up terrified and afraid, and then just go right back, and then there was no waking them out of it. It was almost like a night terror. And for those of you who have young children, you might have experienced this. Typically, kids that are like 1.5, 2.5 years old will sometimes experience that, where they'll wake up and you can't wake them, and they're awake, but they don't know they're awake. That's a common thing. This started happening to, and I can tell you this. I've known this individual a very long time. He's never had these things happen. Okay, it happened after this regular use of the Ouija board, and we were, like I said, doing it regularly. We were doing it seriously. Every night for months. We had volumes of information from it. And like I said, most of it was predictive, and none of it came true. Not a word of it came true. So, what do we make of that? Well, let's look a little more at the science of it. So basically, science explains, I mean, it recognizes that Ouija boards do things, and people do have experiences with using them in terms of getting information off of the board. But how is the planchette moving? Well, first of all, your hand has to be on it in most cases, although we have received reports of people who have used Ouija boards where the planchette moved on its own. I can say I have never experienced that, so I can't testify to the authenticity of those kinds of claims. I know people that swear that this has happened, but I have not witnessed it. So if I have not witnessed something, I just leave it in the realm of plausibility, or maybe not even that, maybe just possibility. But I've not seen it. So typically, in normal operation, your hand has to be on the board, and so what science is saying is that your subconscious mind, which is sometimes referred to as your second intelligence, is actually the one doing the communication. And because that level of your brain is completely cut off from your conscious brain, the one that you know, the one that you hear in your head when you're thinking, it feels like it's coming from an external source. And because this second intelligence is the one that's actually moving your hand, it feels as though your hand is staying still because your conscious brain interprets that. But it's actually the subconscious mind that's moving it. Okay. Doesn't explain why when you have 3 or 4 people on there, it all moves in the same direction. You would think that all the different subconsciouses would be moving it in different places, you would feel that resistance, but you don't. I mean, if you've ever done the Ouija board, then you know. If you've had results with it, then you know it moves very freely. It barely takes any touch at all, and it doesn't fight. There's not like different people fighting the direction. It just sort of moves. Okay. So ideomotor is fine, and I don't have a problem with it, but I think where they're missing the connection is basically the metaphysics of how it works. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people want to know, does it really work? Well, actually, in my contention, and I don't give a lot of opinions on my shows. I tend to like to give just raw information, which comes from either my direct experiences, or usually my direct experiences in union with ancient esoteric and theological wisdom. Okay, and then I give an answer based upon the combination of those two things. But in this particular case, I will give a contention, which is sort of an educated opinion. And I will say from my own personal experience, which is extensive in this Ouija board usage, as well as what I know how metaphysics works, I think both science and the believers of the Ouija board are correct. It is ideomotor effect, but that doesn't mean that it's not communicating with other levels of reality or other intelligences. And I think that second intelligence that science refers to, or what we would call the subconscious, is very, very vulnerable to influences outside of it, which is where you start to get into the realm of demonic possession, which is where the consciousness is slowly take over. So if you're going to say, well, then how were they able to manipulate the dust on the television screen but not tell the number on the roulette wheel? Which that was my question back then too. I didn't understand this. I didn't understand how they could do something as dramatic as that, but not something as simple as just go over there and look at the roulette wheel, tell me what it landed on. Seems like writing in dust backwards would be a lot, or upside down anyway, would be a lot more difficult. Well, here's the metaphysics of it. Okay? These are communications from spirits. And the inherent danger in using a Ouija board comes from the simple fact that you have to surrender your subconscious mind to this alternative external intelligence in order for them to communicate with you through this medium, which in this case is the Ouija board. So it's not opening up some portal. It's not opening up some vortex where spirits are coming through. What it is doing is you're creating the portal inside your mind, and it is using all of you, your brain, your energy, your body, in a very mild possession to be able to manipulate the planchette and talk to you. So it is using ideomotor in the sense that it will feel like you're not moving the planchette because you're not. And it is true that it is your subconscious mind that is moving it, but what is influencing the subconscious mind to give the information? That's where the danger is. Okay? Because it involves that surrender. It involves that permission to use me. And when you get into that, anything can come through. And in most cases, because of the way the construct of the corporeal world rests within the overlaying layers of the non-corporeal world, what we refer to as the demonic realm is actually the very first condition to come through. It's the closest to ours. So the demonic is going to be the easiest one to connect with, the easiest one to communicate with. Forget trying to reach the angelic realms, okay? Because they only will come when they want to, unless you're using Enochian magic or something like that, which I would absolutely under no circumstances recommend that you ever do, because evocation is its own danger, and we've talked about that a lot on Twitter as well, and we'll maybe have a show on the dangers of evocation. You can invoke an angel, that's perfectly fine. That's requesting permission through prayer, and, they will help you, but usually not in very dramatic ways. But that's not so with the demonic, which is much more accessible to us because of our, well, for lack of a better word, the geography of how the what we call the material world and the spiritual world, how they overlap. Okay. So there's your inherent danger. That answers the first question that I wanted to get to tonight. One of the other things that I wanted to mention is we discussed, are they truly dangerous? Yes, they are. Should you avoid them? Well, that's up to you. Because just because something is dangerous doesn't necessarily mean it is to be avoided. But I will say that 99.9% of the population probably should steer clear of these things. Because most people are so out of touch with their conscious minds, they can't even control a thought for 5 minutes. Believe me, I know. Because, I do a lot of public speaking, and you can tell when you start losing people around the 5-minute mark. Unless you're really captivating. And people like you who are audio learners and like listening to talk shows like this one. So, talking to you guys is a pleasure because, you wouldn't be here listening to this if you weren't already tuned in on that level. But on the more, on the level more of a average person, people tend to lose their attention after about 5 minutes. Okay, so, when you have an average like that, probably not a good idea to start playing around with your subconscious mind and giving it access to all of that spiritual material out there that you're not prepared for. So I would say 99.9% or maybe 98.9% of the population should probably steer clear of these things. They're just too dangerous, and you're not skilled enough to use them, plain and simple. But there is a small group of the population that gets value out of them. And I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. As long as you know what you're doing, as long as you have some basic discipline and control, yes, you can contact higher realities with this thing. And you can definitely penetrate beyond the demonic into more, useful dialogue with higher spirits. You can. That is possible. It's not permission to go do it. It's not saying, you shouldn't, you should go run out there and get your Ouija board. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is I'm not going to condemn the people who are able to successfully use them and use them with respect and dignity, which every spiritual action should always be done in with that spirit, with that mentality in mind. But if you do have one and you want to get rid of it because of, things that you feel might have become attached to the board, which is possible. Spirit attachment does go into inanimate objects as well as with people. The best thing to do would be to contact my office, and we can take care of that for you. We've done that before. We've even did a live stream of it on Twitter using Periscope or Facebook Live or something. I don't remember which one we used. But that's the best way to get rid of it. Don't try to get rid of it yourself. People will say, I'm just going to go burn it. No, don't do that. Don't do that. That doesn't get rid of attachments. You have to burn it the correct way. And usually that requires exorcism and a annihilation in a holy fire. And only a priest can do that, or a bishop. Joy, your thoughts on Ouija boards? I know that you don't have much experience with them because they have not really worked for you. But in any of your explorations, have you encountered anybody that has had interesting experiences, or what are your personal feelings on them?
Well, I like you. I don't think most people know how to use them properly, and now there's some kind of YouTube challenge where they're using 6 Ouija boards at once
Okay.
and trying to contact demons on each of them.
Well, that might be actually safer than Tide Pods. I don't know. Oh my goodness! So, are they getting results, or is it just fun and games? What's going on? Do you know?
It's just fun, and you can tell it's kind of staged.
Yeah.
Because they'll leave the room, and when they come back, something's different.
But you think they're actually doing that for the YouTube presentation, like they're faking evidence? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on YouTube, anything's possible. I mean, let's face it. You don't know who you're dealing with. Well, I mean, even on real television, anything's possible. So, I mean,
they always say that there's some demon. They always say that they're up to no good.
Yeah.
And in the stories that I've heard, they always start off trying to say that they're nice. So, in the videos, they're always demons, right off the bat.
Right off the bat. Well, I think that's dangerous. I know that somebody had asked me on Twitter, hopefully she's listening tonight. Somebody had asked me a while back how they are to... she's a teacher, and she hears about her students, which I assume are teenagers, playing around with Ouija boards, and she wants to know how can she discourage them from doing this. And, my answer to that really is, and maybe this is more of an answer that would be more appropriate to the other show than this one, but then again, there's going to be crossover here. This is, just basically the differences in these shows are the primary topic or subject matter, but we can get back into theology or a good church answer if necessary. And I am still a bishop, even though, I want to exercise more of my other side as an esotericist and metaphysician on this show. But I will say there really isn't any way that's appropriate for a teacher to discourage her students from using Ouija boards. Because if you try to do that, you're going to most likely come across to a great majority of people as being superstitious. A lot of people do not believe in these things, or if they do, they're kind of like on the fence, or they, kind of see it as stupid, but they're curious. But they're not going to have really a serious approach. The majority are not. And they're going to just see you as being maybe suffering from religiosity and pushing your views on them. I would strongly advise against trying to get involved in this, to be honest. And that might sound like not the answer you want to hear, but I mean, what you can do, though, if you really want to add a word of discouragement, you could simply say, I would never get involved with those things. And you could even say that you've known somebody that's had very serious experiences with them with serious consequences. And you can reference me in this case. I've seen some things with this. I'd like to think I'm a little bit experienced with it and can lend an intelligent answer. Yeah. You could say that, you've known people that have seen some very serious things, and, I wouldn't get involved with it. But to go out and say, oh, don't do it, you're just going to create forbidden fruit, and teenagers love forbidden fruit. The more you tell them not to do something, the more they're going to find ways to do it. So if you really want to discourage them, you basically would probably just leave the seed in their mind that something they don't, and you're not telling, but you're just basically giving a word of warning, which might get them a little bit curious, but some of them might get too afraid to, pursue it any further. Ultimately, it comes back to personal responsibility. Some people have also asked me on Twitter, shouldn't they be made illegal? I'm firmly against that, because that gets too much into government imposing upon spiritual practices. And if people want to use a Ouija board, they should certainly have the right to, even if it isn't a wise choice. I don't think the government should be telling us that we shouldn't do it. I kind of feel that way about the whole. It comes back to like the whole thing about prohibition and alcohol. I mean, that was a big failure. And I mean, honestly, if I want to drink, I want to drink. I don't want the government telling me I can't drink. I live here in Georgia. Some of these counties are dry on Sunday. Some of them don't start selling alcohol till 12:30, and it's these churches that push these things. And I'm a bishop, and I don't agree with that. It's like, I don't want my religion infringing upon other people, and so I don't want the government infringing upon my religion. And so I think it comes back to personal responsibility, and that's how I would answer that. Joy, do we have any other questions about Ouija boards, either from the chat room that you might have noticed or from Twitter that I haven't caught? Anything that we could cover on this subject?
Well, there's the question about inanimate objects having spirits.
Oh, yes, inanimate objects having spirits. Yeah, that's a good one. This gets us into a little territory in philosophy and theology called animism, okay, which is kind of this idea that the spiritual condition of things is alive, regardless of whether or not something has organic life. We tend to think that things that are organically alive are truly alive, and those are the things that have spirits. So obviously people have spirits, right? And a lot of people believe that animals do. But after animals, not so much. Okay, maybe bugs, but your desk, your car, your house, your trees, maybe trees. Some people do believe trees have spirits, but rocks, okay, do not. But the fact of the matter is, animism is correct. That's the oldest form of religion, actually, that this world has ever known. It's the most ancient form of religion. The idea of that spirits exist, that the world is a spiritual place. And it is a spiritual place because it's both corporeal and non-corporeal. And the unfortunate thing is that science zeroes in on the non-corporeal. But in reality, science zeroes in on the corporeal, but ignores the non-corporeal, with the exception of psychology, that gives us a little bit with scientific approaches towards the non-corporeal, but only in terms of how it affects the mind and consciousness, not really in the sense of what we would today understand to be spirituality. But let's not forget that the word soul, okay, actually the Greek word takes us back to the original word psyche, which we get the word psychology from. So in the ancients, saw a soul as an identity that could be preserved in a permanent way, which is where we start getting into the idea that souls go to heaven to live forever with God. Jesus saves your soul, and so the soul is preserved forever. This is that personal identity. That's what a soul is to the ancients. It wasn't like this spiritual thing so much as it was your mind and your personality. Spirit comes from a different word that brings us back to pneuma, the Greek word where we get the word pneumonia, the idea of breath, this non-corporeal life force, okay, which sort of gave life. It's the breath that God breathes into Adam to animate him. Doesn't give him his personality, gives him his life. So spirit and soul are two very different things, and the ancients saw them as two different things. So you have psyche, you have pneuma, and then you have soma, the body. Okay, body, spirit, soul. All things have a physical counterpart and a non-physical counterpart. So in this context, we can say that all things have a body, and all things have a spirit. Not everything has a soul, because not everything has that divine connection, that personality, that individuality, that thing that makes you you. That's unique to certain things. But all things have a spirit. It's just merely the non-corporeal side of them. And we live in a universe that's both corporeal and non-corporeal. This gives us the illusion of a physical world and a spiritual world, when in reality, both things are happening here and now, right in this very moment. It's not different places. Spirits don't go to different locations. They are right here with us, everywhere. In a way, all places are haunted. It's what makes a haunting is when the spiritual activity in that location becomes so excited and so concentrated that now even a person of ordinary consciousness can detect it. You don't have to be even a medium to see it. There's things going on there. Okay? And that's the difference. So, yes, rocks, trees, cars, houses, everything's imbued with a spirit, just not an individuality, not a personality, not a consciousness, because there's no brain in a car, right? There's no brain in a house. But they will develop energy that is non-corporeal. And some of this energy can become so sophisticated that it actually contains the essence of the fundamental faculties of awareness that exist within the cosmos itself. And thus, these properties can be connected to those who come into close proximity. We had a person on Twitter talking about how she felt her house was protecting her from people who meant her harm. And this is where we get into this discussion. This is a prime example. I believe that it is. I really do. Because I know that there are spirits. You can go. You can say, people say, oh, I feel the energy. Like, I know a lot of people. Joy, you're one of them. You don't like Atlanta. You don't feel that this place resonates with you. I've told you, it sure as hell does not resonate with me. I'm kind of stuck here. You fortunately are not. But what you're really talking about is that the spiritual center of Atlanta is not compatible with your own personal spiritual vibration. That's what it is. And, you can live in a house just not compatible with it. And then you live in a house that it will always be home. You can't even get rid of it. The spirit in that house, the spirit of that house is conducive and interacts with you in a benevolent way. And that's the reality of that. We're going to now take a moment here to just break from all of this. I'll be back with Sister Maximilian in just a moment. Stay tuned. This is Vestiges After Dark, and I am Dr. Bryan Ouellette. Well, welcome back, everyone. This is Dr. Bryan Ouellette here for Vestiges After Dark. and we're getting ready for the second half here with Sister Maximilian. My co-host Joy Keeling's just not feeling terribly well tonight, so she's going to go and listen while we continue the second half of this show and take your questions. Stay tuned. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the second half of Vestiges After Dark. Once again, I am Dr. Bryan Ouellette, and I'm here with Sister Maximilian. You know her on Twitter as Tracy. She is my wife. One of the benefits of the independent sacramental movement is there is no restriction on clerical matrimony, and I think that's a good thing. Please welcome Tracy to the show. How you doing tonight?
I'm pretty good. Looking at all this stuff.
Yeah, well, you're going to kind of fill in a little bit for what Joy does, and that's follow the chat room and, let me know what the questions are. I am monitoring briefly there, and I see that Joe had a question about automatic writing. And that some of the results do not lend itself to the ideomotor effect. And it's for the exact same reasons. Yes, automatic writing, for those who practice it correctly, do communicate with the spiritual realm in much the same way that a Ouija board is, which means that automatic writing is just as dangerous as a Ouija board, but also just as effective in the hand of a skilled user. So, yes, you will get results that extend outside of the realm of the ideomotor effect, and you will get information that can be quite startlingly accurate, depending upon how, who you're communicating with and how skilled you are at automatic writing itself. Sometimes you can just connect into parts of the spiritual world, for lack of a better, I don't like using that terminology so much because it always assumes or gives us the idea that it's somewhere else. But in reality, it's right here. And but when we connect to it, there's a lot of information there. In fact, everything that has ever been done is stored. Everything that ever will be done is stored there. It's a timeless condition. It contains the entirety of all things, all potentials. And so therefore, a lot of the information that can be extracted from it, which Carl Jung sort of referred to as the collective unconscious. In Theosophy, they refer to it as the Akashic records, is not applicable to this universe, because you can connect to literally any potential universe in that location, in that state, that condition, whatever we want to use. It's not good semantics, but what can you do? And so, yeah, you might get information that seems really credible, and yet it doesn't happen. Well, this is why. And this is exactly why. The Ouija board gave me all of these predictions, but it wasn't correct. Then you might say, well, what about that roulette wheel? Why couldn't it tell me the number? And I have a theory on that. Again, it's only a theory. But my theory is that the spirits that I am, or were, at that time communicating with, which I really do believe they were actual spirits, do not see our reality the way that We do, including things that are of a consistent nature or a tangible nature are less tangible for them. And so therefore, when they looked at the wheel, I think, and the reason they gave me actual numbers is because they specifically saw what in their reality it landed on. Of course, that's, again, theory. But I think it's good, educated theory, to be honest. What other questions do we have out there, Tracy?
Yes, Kelly asks, who or what is Zozo as encountered on Ghost Adventures when they use the Ouija board?
Well, the Zozo thing, this is something that we are actually encountering a great deal, but it seems to have only come about since Ghost Adventures, although I am getting reports that there were encounters with this thing prior to the popularization on the show. And then we even had several clients, and I'm talking several clients in the past 2 years that have filled out intake forms with my office that are the result of having a encounter with the Ouija board in which a spirit by the name of Zozo comes through. And, Zozo's not the name, okay? Zozo is the operation that it performs on the board, usually going back and forth between the Z and the O, depending upon how it's configured. I can tell you on circular boards, mine's actually a circular board, the configuration of the alphabet is different and therefore does not lend itself to that. On my board, when you get something of a darker nature, it does a figure 8. It doesn't do Zozo. So it seems to be some kind of interaction with what I think are high-level, darker forces that we would, probably categorize as demons. And it could be any number of them. It's most likely always a different one. But it is something that is strong. That's the one thing to take away from it. So anytime we have an encounter with something that refers to itself as Zozo through a Ouija board, you're dealing with something that is pretty powerful and dark. And that's about all you can really say about that. That doesn't necessarily even mean that it's a satanic demon. It might not even be a fallen angel. But it could very well be something that is, going to really mess you up. And you're not going to want that. You're not going to want to be spiritually messed up, let me tell you, because that's what I do. I help people overcome these types of issues, and I see too much, and I can tell you, dealing with these things is just not worth it. Just not worth it. Do we have any other ones?
Yes, Joe is asking, does automatic writing open the door, so to speak, just like the Ouija board? Yeah,
exactly the same way. But always through the door is the subconscious. Okay, so it's an internal door. It's not an external one. I don't like when people refer to Ouija boards as opening, portals or vortices. No, it's the portal is in your mind. That's where science can't get past that part of it, because it is an internal reality. It is using your brain function in order to communicate, and therefore it's coming through the complexities of these alternative aspects of consciousness that we are not consciously tuned into. But those aspects of the mind can be tuned into anything in the universe, anywhere, because there really is no distance. There really is no time. When we start getting into non-corporeality, when we start getting into this thing that we call the spiritual world, we are now existing in timeless states, okay, where linear conceptualizations don't really matter anymore, don't really have the same significance anymore, okay? So anything that the subconscious mind taps into is fair game for coming through, unless you are very skilled and know how to channel very specific entities. And there are mediums out there that can do this, although they are far and few between. And more people think they are at a higher level of mediumship than they are. Even ones that are so-called professionals are usually not anywhere near the skill that would be required to successfully utilize this in any meaningful way, in my opinion. So hopefully that answers that question.
Kelly asked earlier, how old are Ouija boards and what is their origin?
I don't know if anybody really knows how far they go back, because you're dealing with sort of a bit of a prehistory from a mysterious background. I know that they became very popularized in the form that we know around the time of spiritualism in the 1800s. So that's when you start really seeing these things in great numbers. And I really don't think there's too many incidences of an actual Ouija board as we understand it prior to the 1700s. But as far as things like automatic writing or using ideomotor function in order to communicate, this is a very old thing. Like tarot cards, they sort of have a mysterious origin, even though we can sort of trace them to a certain point when, we start seeing them, or the more or less the content on them, and the esoteric symbology on them, goes back to a esoteric prehistory that is very difficult to trace in any historical way. You're just spinning your wheels and speculating after a certain point, and Ouija boards kind of fall into that. But I would say the current manifestation of them, around 17 to 1800s. And was that the whole question? There was two parts to that question.
What is their origin was the second part. But I think
yeah, again, what is the origin? We really don't know. Who developed the first one or where it came from, but it was most likely a European invention, at least, again, in the form that we understand it to be today.
Joe made a comment saying that it almost sounds like the ideomotor effect can apply to EVPs as well.
Oh, yes, and I'm so glad that came up. It was something that I actually thought about discussing at some point on this show in future episodes, but I don't mind really sort of tapping into it a little bit tonight because that's a really interesting way. And honestly, all of that paranormal equipment that you see on Ghost Adventures, okay, all of it, from the Ovilus 5 to the Spirit Box to, electronic voice phenomena, all of it comes back to the same principles that are at work within the Ouija board, automatic writing, and even to a certain extent divination itself. They all basically operate on the same general principle, which is releasing your subconscious mind to whatever the energies are around it, which could be could be vast. I mean, we're talking all sorts of different things could be in your proximity. When you shut down those barriers and let your subconscious access them, which is what is required in all of these esoteric arts and sciences, or at least the arts, maybe not so much the sciences. I consider the esoteric sciences to be like astrology, numerology, which is more of a tangible, calculative type of our operation, whereas tarot, runes, I Ching, automatic writing, Ouija boards are operating on more of a internal meditative aspect. When if you use tarot cards, for example, if you go to a tarot reader, they're going to have you sort of rest your mind, maybe take some deep breaths. You're going to, again, that's to prepare the subconscious mind for doing its work. In this case, to channel whatever the archetypal energy that is contained in the situation that you're asking about would be able to then enter into your subconscious mind and then connect through synchronicity to the cards that you're shuffling. It's a little bit like automatic writing, with the only difference is you're not really stacking the deck in tarot. You're really using randomization and the properties of randomization in order to produce a connection to whatever spiritual reality you're connecting with. But that's also, again, the inherent danger with all of these things, which is why the church forbids use of Ouija boards, and why, that has come up in other other denominations as well. Not so much other religions, but other denominations. Christianity is definitely the most harsh towards divination, but likewise in the East, it's the complete opposite impression. In the East, with Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Shinto, Eastern religion is almost looks at divination as a sacrament. It's sacred. It's a sacred communication with higher realities. But then again, you got to remember the people that engage in these things are already well trained and equipped to connect to those higher realities. Those of us in the West who have not received that training are going to most likely connect with a demonic force, which actually takes me to one of the questions that came up on Twitter today. I'd like to actually go and read it to you. It's a longer question, and something that I think is worth discussing now that we're on the subject. Let me see if I can bring it up here. Kind of lost it, so I'm going to have to dig through my Twitter replies to find it. Bear with me. Scrolling down, we get a lot of messages coming in every day. Well, you guys who follow me on Twitter, and Twitter's a great way. Follow me at if you're not following me on Twitter, make sure you follow me at Exorcist Bishop, because there is a great deal of information that I do share there, and it's worth exploring. Where is that? I had it up on my screen, and now it went missing. Doesn't look like it wants to be found, but let me see. I'm going to dig for it, because this is a really pertinent question, and it's very applicable to the discussion that we're having right now. Here we are. Okay, so it's Bruce from Twitter. This one's for you, where he writes, "Hello, Bishop. This is a little excerpt of an interview to a Swiss exorcist. Do you agree 100% with him? Thank you." Well, let me read you the excerpt that he gives me. "Can people put themselves in danger? Yes. By getting involved with anything that has to do with magic, the occult, witchcraft, or cartomancy. If it helps us to grow in sanctity when we go to Mass, pray, go to confession, or draw near to God, in the same way black masses, satanic rites, movies, and music of that kind have the effect of bringing us closer to the devil. I dealt with the case of a woman who began reading tarot cards, as many do for fun, except that in her case she truly divined people's past and present, and in some cases their future, and naturally she was a great success. At a certain moment she understood on whom her success depended, and she stopped doing it. But it was too late. She was possessed." Now, there's a few problems here. Because obviously, first of all, he's coming from the premise that tarot really doesn't work. It only works because the devil, or some kind of demon, or something in legion with the devil, makes it work. And then he kind of lumps, black masses and satanic rites in with movies and music of that kind, whatever that. I guess he's talking about dark movies, horror movies, or whatnot, bringing us closer to the devil. Well, here's the thing. Okay, he's not entirely wrong. Do I agree 100% with him? No, I don't. But not because he's wrong, but because he's making false correlations. These are sort of extraneous variables that appear to be a result, but it's actually because of something that you're not considering. What it really comes down to, honestly, in the end, all of this comes down to spiritual cultivation. And we are a society that does not do this anymore. Okay, that's the bottom line. We've become secularized. We demonize religion. We forget that religion is being operated by man, and that man is a fallen creature, and he's going to screw up and make mistakes. And so then we blame the whole religion. We throw the baby out with the bathwater, and now, and then you got other types who are like, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious, and they think that that's sufficient. It's not. And we might have to do shows on why that is, because that question comes up from time to time too. But the fact of the matter is, okay, it is not the fact that, going to a movie, seeing Demon House, Zach Bagans' Demon House. I know when that came out, I was getting questions constantly about this one. When that one came out, everyone wanted to know, is it safe, Bishop? Should I watch it? And my answer to them is, the only way the devil can ever get connected to you and use your power is through fear. No other way. So as long as you are able to proceed with the confidence of God within you through whatever religion it is you practice, and this audience is a broader audience, so I'm not going to get too Christian on you for those of you who are not Christian. But the fact of the matter is, there's many ways to access God. Christianity happens to be, in my opinion, one of the better ones. But there are other ways, and there are many valid religions out there that connect you to God, albeit imperfectly, and even the Roman Catholic Church agrees with that. If you're not cultivating that relationship in whatever way that means, through some valid methodology, then you're not going to be protected, and you're going to put yourself at risk. And so, yes, when you go see a dark movie and you become afraid of it, there could be a exploitation of your vulnerability by demonic forces. And like we talked about with tarot cards, if you're opening your subconscious up to spiritual forces out there that you are not prepared to deal with, and you are at least on some level afraid, you shouldn't be doing these things because you're not protected and you're not skilled. The skill is what's important. That's why the church really basically condemns it all, because it's like they're not going to train you in how to be skilled in divination. So it's just going to be a flat-out rejection of the whole thing. But, try to tell a Buddhist, particularly a Tibetan Buddhist, when, one of their very sacred oracles is basically the equivalent, the Buddhist equivalent of a sacrament. You're going to tell them that that's evil? And honestly, the Buddhist form of the oracle of Tibet is actually a type of possession. Yeah, it's possession. But it's not a demon in a satanic sense. It's actually a benevolent, maybe not so much benevolent, it's probably a wrathful Buddha. If you've ever seen the movie Kundun, it shows an example of it. But, they don't mean harm, they give help. And the information is useful. But they're trained. They're not just dabbling, going to your local New Age bookstore and picking up, a few Llewellyn books and saying, okay, now I'm an expert. Like these people who study shamanism, the Idiot's Guide to Shamanism, now they're calling themselves a shaman. It does not work that way. All right. So, again, it comes back to respect. It comes to skill, and it means that, you have a relationship to God in which you can operate without fear. Then what this exorcist is saying no longer carries any weight. You could do almost anything and come out okay. But not if you're not prepared for it. And that's why he saw this person who got involved in tarot cards, why he saw that it led to possession. Because the archetypal energies that she's dealing with in the tarot became a form of what I call archetypal possession, and then has to be dealt with in the way that the church deals with these things, in which case it most likely resulted in an exorcism. So that's another question I wanted to get to tonight, and I'm glad I was able to. Are there any other ones out there?
Yes, Sister Kateri asked if homemade Ouija boards are as effective as store-bought.
Yeah, identical. unless, of course, you're buying one from a witch, as I did, who had literally consecrated it for purposes, then you're getting into a different arena, which might be why, the one that was so powerful for what it did. But yes, you can create one out of scrap paper. We've actually, Sister Maximilian, you were there. Sister Mary Joan was with us that day too, where we had a client that had a homemade Ouija board on basically scraps of paper. And it was cold that day, and we had a fire going. Sister Mary Joan and I were enjoying a cigar by the fire with some rum, if I'm not mistaken. And we took our liturgical books, and we consecrated a holy fire right there in my living room fireplace, and we threw the Ouija board in, and that was the end of that. Remember that one?
Yeah, and I do remember that she was very upset that she wasn't present for the second one.
Well, yeah, and that was because we had I had eventually gotten sick and tired of it. There was, we've always, as a part of our service in this ministry, always allowed people to send cursed objects to us for eradication, which is honestly the only appropriate use, only appropriate solution for these things. Giving a cursed object away, doesn't necessarily break the connection to you if it's causing you problems, and certainly it could create new ones for the person you're giving it to. So, we have an eradication process that we do for this. It involves exorcism and then eradication by holy fire. So people will inevitably send me cursed objects, and at the time we were storing them in my garage at my home. And, even though it was sealed, some of these things, we had actually one that was a Gohazan, along with a Ouija board that, again, we live streamed the exorcism of the Ouija board, but it still had to be thrown into the holy fire. Sometimes what I will do is when an object comes, I don't open it, I seal it, leave it in a ritually sealed location, and then when we're able to deal with it, which tends to involve having to build a fire and commit some time to it, then we take it out and we finish the job. Now we have a containment cabinet at the church, which, if you've been following my Twitter, you've probably seen pictures of Sister Mary Joan and I working on that. And that's where we're storing things right now. Right now there's an alleged haunted doll in there. And it's staying in there until we are able to gather the team together to do an investigation of it at the church. We have quite a few appointments ahead of that, so it's going to sit there for a while. But we will get to the assessment and see if it is genuinely haunted, and then we'll talk to the owner to find out what she wants us to do with it. After, we're able to determine one way or the other. But anyway, I had a Gohazan, which is a Buddhist deity trapped in a scroll, and a haunted spirit-attached Ouija board, and they were sitting in a ritual space inside my garage. But somehow the Gohazan got out, and Sister Mary Joan had actually come to my house that evening, and she was waiting we live out in the country. It's very dark. There's no street lights anywhere, so when you're out there, it's just pitch darkness. And she was out there in the driveway waiting for me to open the door, and she saw a shadow being leave the garage area and walk by her car, and she thought it was me. And she was only until she got out and realized that I hadn't even come out yet, and there was nobody there with her, that she realized that something was going on. And I told her, I said, well, yeah, the Gohazan is getting out. And the reason I knew it was getting out was because it was wreaking havoc on the entire garage or anything associated with the garage. We had, Tracy and I both had our windshields smashed. We had the garage door would no longer close or would open by itself. We would be at church and the alarm, the garage is wired, and the alarm, if anybody goes near the garage or opens up the garage door, the alarm goes off. So we were at church, alarm's going off, police are coming to the house, they can't find anything wrong. I looked at the security video footage because we have video cameras all over the property, and there was nothing that indicated that anything was wrong, but this was all because this gohazon was getting out. Well, when my cat died, which was a young kitten, went from a perfectly healthy cat to a dying cat, that's when I was like, all right, you've pissed me off now. And you might say, well, Bishop, why were you hanging on to this gohazon that was getting out so much? Because a gohazon's not typically evil, okay? A gohazon is actually beneficial, but if you no longer develop your relationship with it, it can turn malevolent. And we, Sister Mary Joan and I, wanted to give this spirit an opportunity to be released, because it's not ethical to do exorcisms and attack and annihilate spirits who cause problems. Okay, we're only at war with the satanic realm. All right, the other forms that demons take are not necessarily satanic, and those things can be dealt with in better ways than exorcism, which is another benefit of being an independent minister like myself, where I can extend outside of the conventional framework to get the job done, perhaps a little bit better than my more conventional colleagues. And so we were going to actually make an offering, which is an appropriate way to, connect with the spirit and request that it leave. And if it didn't leave, we were going to leave consequences that then we would have to annihilate it. Well, when it killed my cat, that was, all bets were off. And so I was so pissed off. I went out to have a cigar, okay, and I tend to have my cigars out in the driveway on the side, because it's usually cool there in the afternoon, particularly in the heat of the summer. And I saw that box there that contained the gohazon, and I knew it had been getting out, and I said, you know what? I'm done. You're gone. And I got angry. I picked up both the Ouija board and the gohazon, and I went out and I threw it into a holy fire. And Tracy, of course, always documents, or we liked her to document more because we would really like for her to do a paranormal blog about our work. She's a fairly good photographer. She has an extremely good camera, and we could get some really good, additional content for all of you out there. So I've been trying to convince her to do it. Maybe you guys can help me do that. But she takes pictures of the work so that we can either tweet about it or just show our benefactors and all of the people that follow us on Facebook and social media what it is that we actually do. And she caught the gohazon being eradicated, and you can see that picture on my Twitter. You just have to go click on my media and just dig through. It's several months ago, but it's there.
It was back around February or January.
Yeah, it was around then. So you can go back to those pictures and you'll see it. It's a flaming picture, so you're going to see it, and it's you can see it. And what was really interesting, and we couldn't capture it on film because it always looks a little bit different in real life than it does on camera. But you could see the gohazon moving, and you could see almost as if there was flesh being torn off bones or melting off of the bones. That did not come through on camera, unfortunately, but those of us who were present did see it. Sister Mary Joan was upset that she wasn't there for that. She wanted to be there for that, and I wish she had been there for that. And that was part of the reason why I was holding off for so long, was waiting for a day where she could get together with me, because she actually lives about 2.5 hours away from me. But no, when you kill my cat, that's it. That's personal, and you lose all your privileges at that point. I don't care who you are. And so he's gone now. And I don't take cursed objects home anymore. Now they go into the containment cabinet at the church. But this gives you an insight into the kind of work that we do and how dangerous it can be. And yes, it's every bit real. I have no reason to I guess, elaborate. I mean, on the truth or exaggerate in any way. on the truth, there's no reason to, because the work in itself is dramatic enough. It doesn't require any extra elaboration. Any other questions out there? We still got some time here, about 14 minutes.
Sure. Daniel asks, are spiritually gifted people more susceptible to spiritual attachments since they may know you can detect them?
Absolutely. 100% yes. And it's not just because they know they can, you can detect them. It's also because you are already wired for that type of connection. And a very powerful, devious entity can manipulate you and exploit that particular characteristic or attribute of your being. And so, yes, very sensitive people who are not necessarily in expert control of their gifts probably should steer clear of this work. Unfortunately, though, it's the other way around. Most of the time when people are sensitive, they actually get deeper into this work when they should probably be running in the opposite direction. Like I said, most people that think they are a skilled medium don't know what a skilled medium is. Believe me, it requires a great deal of discipline. It takes almost a lifetime to master. There's very few savants out there in the realm of psychic ability and mediumship. And you can hate me for saying that. You can criticize me, but again, this is one of those times where I'm speaking from personal experience and the work that I do and the people that I meet, and doing it on a professional level. I mean, this is all I do. I do nothing else. I don't have almost everyone else on the church staff has a day job. I do not. This is my job, and I almost works close to 70 hours a week, sometimes more, very rarely less, doing this. So, I have a unique perspective on this. I see a side that the average person doesn't get to see. And so when I share a warning, I don't mean it to be insulting to those of you who disagree because it doesn't match up with your paradigm. I'm merely just saying this so that you understand what it is you're really dealing with. That does put you more at risk.
All right. Joe says he considers true EVP to be that which audibly presents as vocal tone, so that he can put the sound file through spectral analysis. Do you agree?
Well, certainly vocal tone is going to be more accurate and clearer and less ambiguous. There's a lot of EVP, the majority, in fact, of EVP, that you cannot make out for the life of you. And you kind of almost can lead a person to hear something if you tell them. Sometimes people will send me an EVP and just say, what do you hear? And I like when they do that, because if you really want my opinion on it, I don't want to be influenced by what you think you hear. But 9 out of 10 times, and I'm really, really bad at hearing what an EVP says, 9 out of 10 times, I will not be able to make it out. It sounds like a voice or it sounds like words, but I can't make out what it's saying. And then somebody will tell me, well, this is what I think it's saying. And then now I hear it. And that's all I can hear at that point. And then it makes sense. And then it's like, well, did you influence me to hear that? Or is that really what's there? Is that what the content is?
It's kind of like the Laurel and Hardy phenomenon that went around on the internet there a few months ago.
Yeah, I mean, it is like that. If you want to hear a really good, what I guess Zach Bagans would call a Class A EVP, if you want to hear a really, really high quality one, Charlie and Shannon Nieswinner, who are the spirit cavers on Twitter that work with me in this ministry, captured one on one of our very early cases with this since we affiliated with the Order of Exorcists. And you can find that by going to the Eye of the Seer channel on YouTube. So just go to YouTube and find Eye of the Seer, all one word, EYE, of the Seer, SEER. And Tracy, if you can actually put the link to that page, I don't know if you have that control, but if you can put the link to that page in the chat room for those in the chat. If you go there, that will bring you, there's not much content there. It's a few lectures I gave and then some stuff from our work from a while ago. There is a EVP there from an investigation, a very haunted location. In fact, to this day, I think it was still the most haunted place we had ever actually investigated. And you will absolutely very clearly hear a woman speaking with vocal tone. So, yes, I tend to agree. That is the more authentic, but not to discredit or to devalue the more electronic sounding ones that are more ambiguous, because there is information there. It's just not coming through in the same way. And you might say, well, what causes that? What causes one to be a Class A EVP where it's like there's just no ambiguity, everyone hears it and immediately hears what it's saying, and then others that you can barely make out? And certainly if you watch Ghost Adventures, you've heard the ones that are barely intelligible, where they even have a hard time, where they're kind of like, we're not sure what it's saying, but we hear this voice. I kind of love that about the show, because they're honest. They're not always trying to lead you with, what they think they're hearing. They're giving you basically, hey, we don't know what this is saying. So why is that? And it has to do with spiritual dissipation. Okay? A lot of people think that spirits are eternal. No, they are not. They, just like bodies, spirits die too. Okay? So you have two sides, right? The corporeal side, the non-corporeal side. The corporeal side we call the body. All right? And the non-corporeal side we call the spirit. And when the body dies, the spirit starts to decompose as well. So in the initial stages of that decomposition, the spirit's still somewhat cohesive, and that's when you get vocal tones. But as it degrades down to the point where there's very little left of the spirit, anything that comes through an EVP is going to sound garbled or indistinguishable from anything else. And that's why that is.
All right. Kelly asks, what is a psychic empath?
Essentially a psychic empath is basically just a fancy way of referring to a sensitive. I don't like the word psychic, because when you hear the word psychic, you start thinking of like fortune tellers and other kind of negative associations that come with that term. So I tend to stay away from the word psychic, although I admit I do use it from time to time. And then there's like the new, more popular term, which is empath, but I don't like that word too much either, because it's almost overused. And so it's like everybody and their mother is now saying they're an empath, and, guess what? They are. Everyone's empathic. But what determines a person that has skill is to what level they've developed and cultivated it. So an empath is a person that has the ability to feel what another is experiencing. So they tend to get psychic information through emotions, whereas a psychic, just the conventional psychic, is a person who can sort of detect through either clairaudience, which is the ability to hear things that are happening elsewhere or have happened before that they did not directly experience, or clairvoyance, which is the ability to see it in the form of visions or something of that nature, which very much parallels in a lot of ways the mystical arts and even mysticism as it's understood within the Christian religion. There are many visionaries that were saints. They had visual experiences, and these would be classifiable in the New Age movement or theosophy or some of these more, modern alternative religion, or not so much religion, but just alternative spiritual practices, as a psychic. But in reality, it's the same thing. So I hope that answers the question.
Doesn't really look like there's anything else.
All right. Well, you know what? I have to say it has been a wonderful start, a wonderful launch to this new show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found value in what we have discussed here tonight on Vestiges After Dark. You know, I really appreciate all of you, and if you appreciate this show, I ask that you please support this show. The best way to do that is to give the church a donation, because the church is what finances this show. I don't pay for it, the church does, and this is one of its outreach ministries in a way, to share accurate information about things that most people don't want to talk about accurately. And so if you go to esotericcatholic.org or Nicholean.org, they both take you to the same place. On the right hand side, there is a sidebar that has help us help others. There's a donation button, and you can click that, and you can basically enter in any amount you wish. And if you want to give a larger or more personal donation, you can also send a check to the church. The address to the church is also on the website. Just go there, and that will help to support this ministry and to keep this show on the air if you find value in it. I really hope that you do consider supporting it. We're also thinking about taking a trip to Las Vegas, and I have some clients out there who need help, and we're trying. They're not able to afford the investigation retainer that we need to ask for when we go out of state. You know, of course, all of our services are free, but in jurisdiction, when you ask us to have to travel, it gets expensive very fast. But Las Vegas tends to be a more reasonable location to vacation to or travel to affordably, and so we would like to be able to go out there and help those clients if at all possible. We have had some donations towards it. Typically, a donation is $5,000 for a retainer, and like I said, we try to use as little of it as possible, and then we give back to the client whatever we don't use. But to Las Vegas, we can most likely, get to them for less money than that. So we're thinking we could probably do that one in $4,000. And so we have a benefactor that is willing to put $2,000 towards it. We have another donor that's willing to put $500 towards it, where we're almost have the trip covered. If any of you who live in Las Vegas or close to it would like to meet up, and when I come out there, we're looking we're exploring the first week of November, right after All Saints and All Souls Day, because I have to be here at the church for those days. But if we are able to get out there before around the first week of November, and you'd like to meet up with me, this would be an opportunity for you to do so. But we would need you to help support this particular mission, which is to go out there and help those clients. That's the primary reason for going. But then we could, as a way of giving back, we can meet up and maybe go to dinner or something like that. So I haven't decided exactly how to go about doing that, but if you'd like to give, towards that cause so that we can go and help those three clients, that would be fantastic as well. But anyway, I want to just say I thank you all. You guys are really the driving force behind everything that I do here on social media, including this show, Vestiges After Dark, as well as its sister show, Vestiges of Christianity. But anyway, I must bid you farewell tonight, and we'll be back next week for Vestiges of Christianity. I believe it is on Friday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's when I'll be back on the air for another Vestiges of Christianity, and then Vestiges After Dark will take place the following week at the normal time. Check the schedule on the show page if you want to remember, and follow us on Spreaker so you always know when we're broadcasting. This is Dr. Bryan Ouellette, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, saying God bless you. Until next time, good night.